welcome everybody to our Q&A event. I'm Tony. This is Dina, freshly back from a canoe trip in northern Ontario, where she refreshed herself in the cool lake waters and immersed in nature, and she's relaxed and extremely spaced out, so you'll have to excuse her state.
Hello, friends. Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome. We're going to answer all of the questions that we can that you have about Kabbalah, and we welcome the friends, the students who are studying at KabU in Kabbalah Revealed in the first and second semesters there, and also friends who are just joining us, people joining us on Facebook and on YouTube. And our priority to answering questions, at least for the first part, will be our students. And the students are going to join us on Zoom, and we're going to be able to relate face to face. We'll be able to hear them, hear you, and see you, and that'll give us a heightened sense of connection, at least to our five senses. The connection is there nonetheless. And we'll also be answering questions from the chats on Facebook and on YouTube. So if you have any general questions or even very specific questions about the nature of Kabbalah, what you've heard, what you'd like to know, that's what this is for. Now I want to ask that the students please turn your camera on, unless you're like not wearing anything. But other than that, or if you're like asleep or doing something that we shouldn't see, please turn your camera on, because we want to be able to see you, to feel you, and also the people who are watching who are not studying will also get a sense of who you are, because in order to understand what Kabbalah is and what the study of Kabbalah is, what it involves. I mean, people have got a lot of ideas, some of them wildly inaccurate. And Kabbalah is nothing if not the science closest to the human heart, because that's what it examines. That's what it teaches us. So if people can see you, they're going to understand in a 360-degree way what it is. They'll be able to sense that as well. But what is it? Since there are many people who will not know anything about it, who are joining us with our students, let's start by trying to define the parameters of what Kabbalah is. So we'll start with a definition that was written by Bala Salam, the master of the ladder. This is from an essential Kabbalistic text, and from an essay, Kabbalistic essay that he wrote called The Essence of the Wisdom of Kabbalah. And what he says Kabbalah is he says, this wisdom is no more and no less than a sequence of roots which hang down by way of cause and consequence, by fixed determined rules interweaving to a single exalted goal, described as the revelation of the Creator to his creatures in this world. Now that is really dense. That's really jam-packed. Okay? I'll read it one more time as he wrote it. This wisdom is no more and no less than a sequence of roots which hang down by way of cause and consequence, by fixed determined rules interweaving to a single exalted goal, described as the revelation of the Creator to his creatures in this world. Now, if a person were to read that and try to understand what it's saying just from our normal reason, that is the way how our logic works, what we know about science, what we know about religion, and all of those things are, mysticism and all that, this would be a very difficult thing to unpack. But let me give you first some of the complexity of what's there, and then I'll simplify it right down. a sequence of roots that hang down by way of cause and consequence, that end up in a single exalted goal. It's telling us that there is an overall reality that follows a single law, a single impulse. And this single law, this single force, builds, in other words, is responsible for absolutely everything in existence. And our perception of this and our involvement in it and our identification with it, whether we actually see this as our reality or not, is dependent on how we are able to sense this impelling idea on its terms or not. When we think about roots and laws and things that hang down from above and create everything and give us an opportunity there at the bottom of all of this creation, at the extent of where the root turned into a branch, to be able to turn around and begin to perceive above it. Something that was built this way for us, it appears to our reason like a linear line like this. But what it's saying is that according to our reason, we're not going to be able to see how this hangs down, because we're looking at it with the wrong sense. If we were able to see it dimensionally in the way it was intended, we would see that there are levels to this. It actually unfolds from above, below, through a series of, let's say, dimensions. The question, of course, is what are these dimensions made of? They come from a thought. This thought creates everything according to a single rule, and this rule is expressed on many, many levels through many dimensions until finally there is a point at which we can begin to perceive, climb back up to that thought, and identify with that thought. The question is, how do we do it? So this is what Kabbalah is really about. Now let me simplify that. People who are beginning to study already have some insight into what really is involved in being able to do that. What has to happen in a person? What needs to change in a person? What do we take into account from our reason? What do we take into account from the heart? How do these things work together? How do we actually learn this? So I would take that whole phrase and turn it into a straightforward English phrase that would be: Kabbalah is a method by which a person can attain the Creator while living in this world. This is without the details. But it is a method of perceiving and attaining what exactly unfolded and gives us our life and our perception of reality. But let's define this even more closely. What's a method? Well, a method is not a belief, it's not a theory, and it's not a philosophy. It is a systematic approach. A method like a scientific method. In fact, it is a scientific method. A system by which we can investigate, register what we analyze there, and build. It's a method by which attainment can be gotten. So who is a person? What is a person? In terms of Kabbalah, it means anybody. Because everything and every person is within this structure from above, below, and is part and parcel of a single thought, really. It's part of one holistic reality. So it's anybody, regardless of whether they identify themselves by religion, by gender, by race, by nationality, by anything. Because it is inclusive, and it is the birthright of human consciousness. It's the source of human consciousness. It doesn't divide, we do. So it's open to anybody. What does it mean to attain? Well, attainment means the ultimate level of knowing something, that is, feeling and experiencing that thing as reality. That becomes our perception of reality. It's not that we, it's there simply within our reason. No, it transcends. It's far beyond that. It's like 3D, or 4D, or actually 10D, those are the dimensions that make up life. 10 dimensions, actually. So it's felt, so to speak, on our flesh the same way that we experience what we call reality now. That's attainment. And finally, well, what's the creator? Are we talking about a God figure, or what is it? In Kabbalah says that the creator is the general law of nature, the general law of reality. So given that it's a method, it's open to anybody, it gives us the ability to ultimately know and see exactly the same thing and the same values and forces as what impels creation. And finally, that what we're learning about is the general law of nature. So just to let us sort of think about that for a bit, let's take a look at the first clip.
There's a science that deals only with the most essential purpose, covering the greatest possible scope, and specifically how we come to know and live in it. It gives us a practical, very human way of studying the highest natural forces, their place in us and our place in them. It's the essential science of meaning and everything that results from it. And in it, rather than beginning by examining physical matter, it starts with a view of life in this world as seen from the perspective of those forces that build and evolve it, and then describes how to reveal our conscious sensation of its purpose in us. So we're going to use its insights to peek into that gap. The science is called Kabbalah, which is a Hebrew word that means reception, how to receive and perceive. Its findings make it clear that what you think of as meaning and inexplicably long for is in fact the desire to relate to the highest, most comprehensive dimension of life. That your longing and doubt are required to make you capable of grasping the purpose and meaning, because they're the container in which you'll eventually receive it. Not only that, it describes exactly what the purpose of life is from the point of view of that dimension, and how this larger goal becomes activated only if and when you consciously engage with it, and not with something else that you imagine. And because its purpose is constantly aimed at your development, it's as if it's waiting for you to reveal it. And somewhere, even if ever so faintly, you feel that. There is a single cause, an impetus underlying, unfolding everything that ever happens. It's a natural mechanism, a law, but the only form in which the human heart is able to perceive and relate with it is as an intention called the thought of creation, and that is to create a creature and to bring it to complete fulfillment. That is both a description of the highest force and dimension of nature and the ultimate purpose of all life. What does that thought have to do with the meaning of your life? You could take the creature part of that equation personally, and it would only be partly true, because the creature in the thought of creation is our entire reality, the cosmos. Every object in it, all its cascading, lesser, non-physical forces and dimensions, everything and anything outside of that intention is the creature. And nothing that has ever happened, is happening, or ever will happen can happen for any other reason or to serve any other purpose. So no matter how events may feel to us, we're always held, nurtured, and evolved by the action of an unwavering force of giving. A constant, unperceived positive influence that's the very essence of meaning. So in the first place, you're already in all of this, And all of this is already in you. The thing that's concealing the profound interrelation, that's preventing us from feeling our true identity, is the exact quality that makes us the creature.
Okay, so let's get to the questions.
Okay, we have our first question here. A student is asking, can we prove that there is a God scientifically? Is there any evidence?
I think that the scientifically that you're speaking about may be weighted on the side of the material science method. That method cannot provide a proof. And because this proof is not, it's not, the way in which, what are you calling it? What does she call it? The creator or he?
God.
God. Well, it's not something abstracted from us. It's something in relation to us, and we are involved in it. So the method of being able to prove this, so to speak, happens when the nature of the scientist undergoes change. It's because there is a quality that comes from the basic law of nature is a particular quality. And the basic law of reason that underlies the material method of science is a completely opposite intention. It is an exclusive intention. It's one that sees that everything exists separately, has qualities. These qualities are measured on this level, on the plane of reason and in the five senses. But so that will only prove something about the qualities of matter, and matter is made up of an attitude that is basic to human awareness and reason, and that attitude is self-concern. Always think about yourself. That's basically what underlies human reason. It's good because it's a method of survival, and it provides a useful basis for certain things, organizing certain things in life. But in order to be able to experience what we call the creator or this upper law, the scientist has to work out within the method how to change their own intention to be like the intention of nature. That makes us able to then perceive God. And God is not a fixed thing with a border. God is an intention, actually. It's an attitude. But it's the most powerful attitude, and this attitude is the basis of all creativity. All force is moved only by this attitude. So I hope that answers your question.
There's a live question from Hector.
Great.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. I have a question about what you said when the talk just started about the levels and the dimensions. So we feel 3 of those 10, but are we in the 10 at the same time, or we open them as we work, or as we progress, or as we change our intention? I mean, are we on them already, or we have to open them as we go along? And do we have to open them, and there's a way of sensing them? Like how does that work? Thank you.
Thanks, Hector. That's a great question, and especially what I like about the question is that you're not taking for granted that we're in it. And that's a really good approach, because we're not. In terms of our basic nature, we're not in it at all. We are in we are in 3 dimensions. You could call it 3 dimensions, divided into 5 senses. But all of those dimensions and senses are all within the material dimension of of that cascading line of cause and consequence, of root and branch. So we're all, that's completely below what we would call the spiritual dimensions. And we have to, and these 10 dimensions are actually, they have to do with the complete interconnectedness of everything. And you'll see as you go along in your studies that in order to truly do the science, the mature steps in this work have to do with working with others, because that force that runs everything and builds everything and runs it does not exist within the points, within the material points. Between me and Dina, within us, there is none of that. There is nothing of the spiritual dimension between us. What connects us? Why we work? For whom we work? This is where those dimensions exist. These 10 spiritual dimensions exist between people in attitudes, and this can become more and more similar to the upper forces. So yes, we have to first of all unlearn a lot of things that we think of now that we think will give us access to that type of perception. It's not that we don't need these things. We do need them. They function as part of how we learn, but they're not everything. They're only a very small part of it, and we have to unlearn certain things. Then we become sensitized to understanding to the fact that we actually are run by a certain kind of a nature that we can't escape. So what we have to do is we have to transform it. So if we want to know something about those other dimensions, we have to take steps to be in a situation in which we are going to be working with the forces between people, not just the ones in us. That's not considered life. That's before life. Life happens in the interaction, and that's why, by the way, it appears that out of spirituality or even religion, which is not the same thing, it appears that there are morals involved. But there aren't morals. The morals are the byproduct of a correct understanding of how things are connected to each other, and they build correct relationships between people. It becomes the nature of one to do the right thing once we start dealing with those spiritual dimensions, and you will. And by the way, in your studies as you go on, you'll begin learning a very scientific, systematic approach to these things, because those worlds, dimensions, levels, and all of that by which everything is created and by which we ascend is laid out in a very discrete way, in a scientific way, in Kabbalistic texts. And there's a book in your set of course books called Kabbalah for Beginners. What is the name of that book? Kabbalah for the Student? Yeah. And in the back of that book, you'll see that there are charts that describe how things descend from above, how all the worlds cascade, and all of its various levels right down to the physical. But in order to understand what's there, we have to change ourselves, and you also get that opportunity.
I have another live question from Gui. I hope I pronounced it correctly.
Or Guy?
Guy?
Hello, my name is Gui. It's Guilherme, means William in Portuguese. I have a question about. I'm always trying to find the ultimate truth about how the world exists and what's reality. So, how do we know if Kabbalah is the real truth about how the things work, and not any other religion is the right one? But I know Kabbalah is not a religion, but how to know these things are really true about like the 10 dimensions? Has anyone got there ever to the 10th dimension and experienced that? Is it possible for us to achieve that in this life? And that's it. How can we know for sure that we are in the right path, or doing anything that's let's say forbidden or not supposed to go after? Thank you very much.
Okay, well, there are three things in your question, and they're all important and I think universal for people who study or even who ask those kinds of questions about, is there any ultimate, is there an actual form, or is everything kind of random and nobody can possibly know the truth? First of all, there is the measurement of truth. What confirms in us that something is so? Well, we know this. It's not something that necessarily that we see objectively, especially in the case of something that involves our whole being. Nobody else can tell you that you're in love with somebody or that you're not in love with somebody, that you enjoy a certain thing or that you don't, that you feel something as so in life or not. All of those things actually, in which these things are confirmed, they're confirmed in you as a result of something very deep that's very hard to put your finger on, but we can say it's the human heart. This becomes our confirmation process. And nobody can talk you out of something that has its place there for you. But that means then that you're going to want to, maybe we want to prove it to somebody else, but that's not necessarily how we discover these things. We discover anything that we know as truth through living into it. We have to test it out. We have to taste it. And by the way, the Kabbalists say, taste and see that the Lord is good. Come and see. Borei, which is the word that we use for like creator, means to come and see. So you have to try it, just like any method. You can't ride a bicycle just by thinking about it if you've never gotten on a bicycle. You will confirm whether or not it is possible to balance on two wheels, not fall, and even do wheelies and all that, only by doing it. And also, whether you're in the right place or any of that stuff, you have to determine it for yourself. You've got to say, yes or no, this is like total crap. But if you don't do that, you can't. There's no way that anybody can tell you that this is true. I can tell you it's ancient. I can tell you that it has a 5,000-year lineage, that until the middle of this century was directly from teacher to student in a direct, unbroken line. Is that a proof of anything? Maybe it's a proof of human dedication. Has anybody attained this? Yes. And it is from those attainments that the Kabbalistic books are written. Those books include what we call the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, and other sort of related books. They're all talking about these forces, the force that impels creation and the force between people. And it tells, anyway, so that's, people have attained that, and they say, well, it was written by God. Well, it was written out of attainment of the quality of the Creator. And finally, the thing about the 10 dimensions is, look, even if you think about it scientifically, you're going to say to yourself, hey, this is built some way. It's not some kind of random projection. You get up in the morning, it's the same world. Still built the same way. You're fundamentally reacting along similar lines, as we progress through history. We know that it has a form. So what's the form? Well, the Kabbalists say it has this form of 10, what's called 10 sephirot, 10 fundamental qualities that are always like in a hologram, repeated in everything, like fractally. It makes up absolutely everything. And there is already a structure there. All we're trying to do is discover it. Through what lens? Through what are we looking at it? That's all that it is. There are no proofs beyond your tasting and discovering it. Oh, we have 120 people now connected with us. That's good. Welcome,
That's great.
everybody.
Next question from another student. Which goal in life makes it worth living? Does any goal that I feel is important to me make my life worthwhile? Is there an ultimate meaning to life?
Well, if you're talking about occupation, like medicine or art, things that you consider, serving, being a social worker, serving those things, do they make life worthwhile? They do, to the degree that they align with the purpose of life that's in the general law. Some things work along with it, and some things work against it. And anything that works against this, causes us to suffer. If we don't change ourselves, our life consists of a lot of unhappiness, suffering, and the feeling that we're not fulfilled. The more we learn what the actual purpose of life is, and the actual purpose of life is to become like that quality that is behind the structure of our existence. That is that quality that we call the Creator, which is pure bestowal, which connects everything and always does good, even if it appears not to be, because it's working for the whole. And this is something that we don't perceive from our self-interest, or what we call from our egoism. We don't see the large scope in which the forces are acting. So if it does something to me that I don't like, I say, how could a good God do a thing like this? No, because we're identifying with the wrong thing. We are actually the whole. We are the creature. Just like that clip said, we are the cosmos. We are the entire creation, is this one quality opposite the Creator, broken down into a lot of detail that has a chance to examine all of the detail, which is beautiful. It's like we get to examine everything and be able to carry our little bit of transformation, or we call it correction actually in Kabbalah, to a point where we begin to fuse together what every single point is perceiving into a similar perception of the whole of creation. And we understand why the forces are working not specifically and only for me, but ultimately to the benefit of each part. But it's taking the action on because it wants the whole to reach perfection, because you are the whole, not the part. I don't know, I just went off somewhere. I don't know if I answered the question, but I hope so.
Okay, we have a live question. That's great. Linian.
Can you hear me? Okay, my question is, what dimension is the afterlife communication? What dimension does that take place in? And is the reason that some people can remember parts of past lives, is that because we are all connected to the same Adam Rishon? And so, remembering pieces of other lives is actually remembering other parts of ourselves. Is that the way I would say it, I guess? Thank you.
All of everything that occurs, it's not really broken into this life and another life. The term, the world to come, that's how it's written. There's Olam Hazeh, this world, and Olam Haba, which is the next world. It's not really speaking about an afterlife, because everything is in the present. Everything is within your experience under evolution towards this exalted single point out of which everything comes, and to reach that as the experience of our own, to be in direct relation to that. So, but the world, this world, means the material world, meaning our concern and our sort of separation of everything into kind of individual, egoistic pieces. The world to come means the next state, the next level of our evolution towards the more inclusive consciousness. And not just consciousness, but acting, like living there and really doing the same actions that the upper force does. It's like an incremental growth through 125 steps, and each one of those steps is the next world. Now, we don't actually, death is something that we tend to paint with the physical perception. But every time we change, and move to another level, this is called a reincarnation. And even when we end our physical sort of form, if we have not completed the complete attainment of the whole system, we come back immediately and begin working again, finding again, we're a child and we have certain things, but we've inherited everything that has happened before in our development, and we come back to the same level and we continue this work within the same whole. So what we remember, and I sort of challenge the idea that we actually remember very much of it, but we certainly inherit all of it. And that's because it's us. And it's just us in evolution, and the parameters of evolution are not limited to this world, but to the higher forces, and the higher dimensions are only their attitudes, their intentions. They're not physical things. They're not separated. Like that first definition, it comes down by means of root and branch. So it's all really the same thing, but how much of it can you perceive? Are we dividing it into time and space when there isn't any? So is there a line between life and life, or is there not? What creates that border, and what's the use of that border? This is what we learn. So this is part of what we need to unlearn, and this is what happens as we transform ourselves in the work.
There's a very related question. So what then is the purpose of the cycle of life and death?
Say that again?
What's the purpose of the cycle of life and death?
The purpose is the complete attainment of the Creator. It's the complete attainment of the whole, and to stop receiving. The difference between receiving and bestowing and giving is that one is an emanating force out of which everything comes without any limitation at all. It is what we call eternity or eternality. It's the treasure chest of existence. Everything comes out of that. Love pours out of that without limitation, without pain, without separation. We are living a limited life that is less and less limited as we go through this. The ultimate thing is to get to that point where we are one and the same thing as that attitude. We stop suffering. We live for the well-being of others. In other words, to give without limitation. That's the ultimate. It's the cessation of suffering, and the identification with the highest force of love. And love is not defined the way that we define it. That's another thing that we discover, beautiful thing that we discover in the study. What actually is love? When does it exist and when doesn't it exist in our work?
Okay. Is it okay to search for happiness?
Well, yes, because we're built that way. It's the only thing that makes us move at all is the search for happiness. But the thing that changes is what we call happiness. What a child calls happiness is a different thing than what an adolescent calls happiness. And when we come to maturity, and we begin understanding that those sorts of happinesses and fulfillments don't truly fulfill us. There's nothing much in those. It's the thing that causes our growth, because we're built to receive. We are the will to receive. So we seek fulfillment. And the nature of fulfillment is what changes as we work. And you can reach certain types of fulfillment on the egoistic level very easily. You know, we can, because things are separated, and if you have money, money is a nice mysterious thing. What is that gives you the ability to get something? You can do that, but then you go, is that all there is? There comes to a point where we're not filled. What we're trying to do is to have a correct desire that the upper force wants to give us that can never be fulfilled, you know, limited, and where we feel like there's nothing to it, I still feel empty, or I'm sickened by what just filled me. We come to a place where pleasure does not have any limitation. Happiness has no limitation because it's not just in us. It is the happiness, joy, and ecstasy of the entire thing. And we're actually experiencing all of that. It's good to pursue that because ultimately, just the difference in our definition of what is happiness from receiving to giving is the full attainment.
Okay, so Rebecca from Forum, she's asking, so if suffering is good for growth, why try to avoid it? In a lot of writing about Kabbalah, I see it advertised as a way to avoid suffering.
I don't think it says avoid. I think it's to understand it and to go beyond it. Actually, we can't learn anything and we can't progress if we separate what we call the left and the right line in Kabbalah. If we try to avoid those things that pressure us, then we're not allowing evolution to work on us, because it works on us not by the external physical pressures of earthquakes and so on. I mean, it does that if we don't respond to the place where it's really intending us to sense and react to it. It's trying to have a relationship with us within our, sort of emotional world and our sense of responsibility and all of that. So if we don't have the kind of what we call, like spiritual pain, where we feel, oh, I don't understand the situation, I don't know how to respond in this situation, I don't know how I can't stand this person or this thing, and I don't know how to go beyond it. That's the way that it evolves us, the quality of our intention. We can't avoid it. We have to learn that's a good force, and so is doubt, which is really the source of suffering. So is doubt a good force? It needs to be balanced with another force, and ultimately there is something above that puts pleasure and suffering, turns them from sweet and bitter into true and false. And above that is a force that unites those two. That's the Creator's force. It's called you'll learn about it, it's called the third line. And this is the place where love exists. It exists over the hatred, the suffering, the difference between what it is that we're feeling right now and what we want to feel. It's what actually allows us to climb to that higher level. But we have to understand how the forces of nature really interact with us. They've been doing it all the time anyway. It's not like this is some new innovation that Kabbalah is talking about. No, it explains how nature works with us. And it's working with us primarily from the inside out and not from the outside in. So we don't want suffering to remain suffering. Kabbalah wants us to understand it as a force, as a mechanism, and to know how to work with it. Yeah.
Student is asking, who does the Zohar or Kabbalah say the serpent in the garden was?
The serpent in Gan Eden is our will to receive. It wants to take the light, and it wants it to be just for me. It wants to use the Creator's force in order to satisfy a very small and limited vessel. And it sees itself, it's the part of us that sees itself as fundamentally separated from everything else. It's an inner force. The whole creation is divided into there's a single force, and it has two sides, right? One side is connection, interconnection, interrelation, the whole. The other side is disconnection, the desire to receive, and these are tendencies within us. So it's not an objective force. It is something subjective in a sense inside of us that we have to learn to manage. There's a lot of details. We're actually going, some of this stuff for those of you who are not students here and are just, sort of eavesdropping on this whole thing, and you're welcome to ask questions. So there's a lot of detail. There's a lot of, it answers a lot of very fundamental things, but there is detail beyond where we are, and where the students are right at this point in your studies. What's important is to have a target. You have to sort of, what the Kabbalistic texts do is not only do they explain the methodology and you need instructors actually to explain the methodology because it's been totally misunderstood for thousands of years, 2,000 years to be specific. But you need the target in front of you too, and that's important in the texts. And so that's why we learn from books. There's another even more fundamental reason why books, like printed on paper, and that you carry around, there's actually a spiritual root to this. But in the books, in your student book package, it contains not only explanations but targets, like things that we begin to understand. We raise our sights a little higher. We understand. It sort of explains, in a sense, what the higher worlds and dimensions actually are in terms of human experience, what we should be measuring in ourselves, and against what are we measuring it. And that you can learn on your own, and you can move ahead, not ahead of others, but ahead in your eliminating of wrong ideas and getting correct targets. And that's why it's important to have the books. And in the books themselves, in the texts, there is what we call, just trying to understand those texts. Even if you don't, that effort to understand spiritual structures and forms attracts a kind of force that corrects our perception. That's how nature works on everything, That's like sunlight to us. This is called the reforming light. But even a plant works that way. It's the spirit of growth works towards a target, towards the sun in relation to the light, and it's by effort that it breaks through the ground and it moves and it opens itself up to that target. That's what books are to us. That attempt to understand, not just in our reason, but in our experience. And working with those things in the books is very important. So aside from the materials that you're given in the course, even people who aren't in the course will benefit from these books. So they're packaged for people in different courses and at different stages. And just got to look at my notes here. Oh yeah. Yeah, for students, there's a 20% discount on the books, right? Can we see the slide of the student book package? In these, there's a part 1 and a part 2, and anybody can buy these, whether you're in it or not. And these contain Kabbalah for the student. It's got a huge amount of stuff in it that deals with the science. There's another book, Attaining the Worlds Beyond, which is about work in the heart. And there's both of these packages are things that you can really advance, you can carry with you, and keep going all the time. And a student needs it. And if you're just curious about Kabbalah, you can learn a lot from this. And perhaps we can also put a link into so that people know where to go to get these books. So if you're a student, you get a 20% discount on the books, and there's a coupon code. The people who are handling the chat will let you know about that. Okay.
Okay, next question. How does that corrected nature appear when you're dealing with others? I mean, what are the sensations with family especially? to read again?
No,
No.
I got it. Well, let's leave family out of it. Because in order to learn this, you have to work with other people who are aimed at exactly the same goal. And that means you work here and you study here, that is in a like at KabU and with other Kabbalistic students, all aimed at attaining the love of others. In other words, the quality of the upper force. So that you know that within that environment, and you're not studying alone, like you may think you're studying alone, but obviously look at all of the people in the Zoom who are also studying with you. You're not alone, and these people in particular are aimed at this quality, that they want to attain the same thing that you do. So you're already connected to these people. But what has to happen is that you are in a place where you are influenced by that. That you sense this quality, and then you will learn as you go on. If you stick with it, there will be an environment in which it'll be much more evident to you that you'll know that you're working with people on this thing. There you learn. There you begin to have sensations, and because everything is aimed only at that goal, you now can measure stuff, and you're measuring what's going on in not only in relation to the material itself, but in relation to those people. What's happening to me in the way that I feel about them? Do I want to be in this? What do I think of them? Am I smarter than them? Am I learning from them? Is the association good? Do I want to run away from this? We all want to run away from it. It's the source of our suffering. And we also know that good in our life, pleasure and happiness, comes from connection with others. So these are the kinds of sensations about receiving and giving in relation to the goal of knowing the upper force, not to anything else. You learn there, and eventually you take it out, and you just function that way because you're perceiving reality that way. If we try to do these things like a self-help program, and we try to do it in our family and in our work before we've attained, that's a much more powerful environment. And it will pull us into the supreme values of that environment. And what are the values of that environment? Me, 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 me. The supreme value inside of studying Kabbalah in this course and as you learn the method and work in it. By the way, it's a simple human method, very simple. But it is a transformative thing because of that value. The more you do that, the more strength and power to be like the upper force accrues to you. And not just to you, to that whole sort of learning society. And from there, we influence things. But we don't mix them up, especially at the beginning, because we simply don't have the strength. You may feel that your sensation of desiring spirituality is overwhelming you now, and I'm certain that it is. You're inspired, and you've probably received some sort of an illumination that makes you want this more than anything. But nature works with us by attracting us and by pushing us by that, the sort of internal suffering and the external inspiration. We have to learn to work with those things first. Yeah.
Are you ready, Tony?
For
Blitz. First question.
I have 3 minutes to answer as many questions as I can. Okay.
Can we ignite a spiritual longing by pondering a non-repeating nature of irrational numbers?
No.
Tony, are you a Mason?
A Mason?
Mason.
No, I'm a Dixon.
A lot of magical books I've read teach how to climb the Sefirot through magical ritual symbols and acts. Is that different from this type of Kabbalah?
It is different because magical acts depend on the individual. It's the individual's sort of manipulation of the system. The system manipulates the individual. There's no such thing, actually. And in order to attain those higher states, there's a failsafe built into the progression towards spirituality, which means that a person would never use that method, and cannot use that method, to attain love, inclusiveness, and the holistic relationship to everything. It is the magic approach has absolutely nothing to do with Kabbalah. It is a different psychological approach, and it takes a person to a different outcome.
Is Torah connected to Kabbalah?
Torah means instruction by the light. So Torah is Kabbalah. That's because it is the interaction of how nature works with us, and that interaction instructs us how to live and how to attain. That is Torah. That's the living aspect of it. The books were called that after the higher spiritual intention, and it's not a book. It just is a way of expressing on a certain level the intentions that we are intended to experience. That's what's in the books.
Are the 10 they mentioned the 10 Sefirot?
Yes, we're talking about 10 Sefirot, but they're not discrete entities, balls floating in space. They are qualities out of which everything in our experience and perception is made from the interaction of these so-called qualities.
When you say inside or outside, do you mean outside of the ego?
Yes. What we consider to be our inner life and what we consider to be objective reality, the line that divides that is our identification with our ego and our own interests. When we start to look at the well-being of others and sense their fulfillment as that which is outside of us is not outside of us, is actually our soul,
10 seconds.
that breaks the wall between inner and outer. And that's attainment, basically.
Okay, 3 seconds. No.
Okay, so how many did we do?
We did 6 questions.
That's fine. And
Okay.
I didn't bring my bell today because I wanted to stop the suffering of people. It's very loud. So maybe I'll bring something else next time. Maybe a bicycle horn.
Okay. Okay. We have a question from our Zoom chat from Joseph. When you speak of the Creator, are you speaking of the conscious, willful, eternal being that created us all, as we learn about Him from the Bible, Torah?
Let's start with Him. What does He mean? What does masculine mean in spirituality? Masculine and feminine are the ways, they're like plus and minus. They are not, there's no judgment of value connected to these things. There is a difference of forces. It's like positive and negative in electricity. He and male means the intention called the will to bestow. Female means the intention of the will to receive. Reality is built out of the interplay of those forces as experienced through 10 Sephirot, through 10 dimensions, so to speak. So He is this intention. There is no being. There is no being talked about in the Bible. There is no God as an entity. There is rather this other concept that is in the Bible, and that is the Kabbalistic concept, which is there is none else besides Him. So let's break it down. There is none else except this singularity of an intention to bestow, which makes it Him, and we are part and parcel of that, not separated from it. And there is nothing other than that, even including us, everything we think, everything we do, and everything we experience. That is what the Bible is trying to aim us towards and have us achieve and live out in our relationships with each other. It's not a male entity of, in that sense. I mean, you may not have been intending to say that, and maybe you didn't mean that, but that's generally what's meant by that question.
We have a couple of live questions.
Great.
Let's go to Daniel.
Daniel, you're unmuted. Go ahead. Daniel, can you talk?
Hello.
Hi, go ahead.
Well, you were talking. I have no video. I'm not watching it. Well, I'm gonna ask. You're talking about Bible and Torah, and about God, the Creator. But who is that Creator, or which people, the geographic, which I have no word. Which kind of people who has known the real God, or for you, who's the real God?
The general law of nature, general law, you say, of the universe, of all experience, that's God. That is what makes everything be the way that it is and evolve the way that it is. There is no real or unreal God. We're not talking here about religion. Religion says that there is such a thing as God, but it materializes God. Why does it? And it turns it into, if not a person, it turns it into a personification. In other words, we take our quality, the will to receive, and we project that onto the forces of nature, the singular force of nature, that law, and we say, well, it must be like us. So it must be separated. There must be a real God and a not real God, and it must be like a person. But it's not like that at all in reality. We are to become unlike the way that we are, and like the way that it is, which is not embodied, which is not separated, is not right or wrong, is always and only right good. Good that does good, belongs to everybody. But when we look at it from the form of religion, which only, it's like, religion is like reading a menu that says there are these delicious dishes, but it's not like eating them. So it says that such a thing exists, and if we don't change ourselves, we try to look at spiritual ideas as separated things this way and that way, and these peoples and these religions are right and these ones are wrong. But everything is happening only within this holistic law of love and well-being. It's an attitude. It's like how you feel. To feel like that or not feel like that. And as a result of feeling that way, to act like that or not act like that. That's what God is. What we call God, right, comes from the Hebrew word Elohim. And Elohim has exactly the same numeric value as the word Hateva, which means nature. There isn't some sort of nature and the cosmos, and then within that is a God. No, these are the same thing. It's only an idea, and everything that follows from that idea must follow. And that's why it's called none else besides him. A single intention governing everything, and we're part of that. What people experience that? The people who change themselves to become like that. How do they change themselves to become like that? Through the method of Kabbalah, which is not a religion different from other religions. It is the way in which we can perceive nature in its entirety, We get the entire system. We understand the principles on which it's working. That's what it is. Yeah.
Hector wants to ask another life question.
He can ask in Spanish, and we can translate for you.
Hi, how are you? Well, thank you for answering too for me. Because I have, again, when you talk about nature and about that those forces work from inside of me, what is that me? Is that the ego? Yeah, what is that me that's working? They work from inside of me, but what is that me? Is what is that?
The thing that we call, well, the whole system is working inside of us. That thing that we call the ego, right now we say that's me. We think that the ego, which is a small part of what we are, is the whole of what we are. We identify, we put ourselves like, it's this thing here in the picture. It's like, it's a function, it's part of a mechanism within this scope of us, and it's like this. But we are like this. We are inside of that and say, that's me and my experience. But it's possible to work on escaping that. So both the intention that's like the Creator and the one that's opposite to the Creator are accessible to us. What it means that it's inside of us is that it has to do with how we feel and how we experience. There actually is nothing outside of us. All these people that we outside of us are actually the uncorrected parts of us. That is, little attitudes that have to do with how we deal with people, with things, why we do it, and because nature made it like this, made it into look like a myriad of stars, planets, galaxies, made it people, because we could not grasp all at once and correct a vessel all at once. It broke it down into bite-sized pieces so that we could change within us all of those things until there really is nothing outside of us, nothing outside of that intention to do good to the whole. So inside, because it has to do with your feeling. It's not some external thing that you take on. It's that you become transformed. That's inside you, in your feeling, in your thought, in your heart, and ultimately, as a result, in your actions and in society as well.
Someone is asking, I'm watching you on YouTube. This is really interesting. Is it real? How do I join the course? Does it cost?
Is it real?
Is it real?
Yeah, well, Kabbalah.info is putting, this broadcast on, and Kabbalah is an online platform that teaches the method of Kabbalah. It teaches the fundamentals of Kabbalah, and it teaches beyond that, the actual method and integration into higher perception. And there are courses that take a person from fundamentals into a sort of an ongoing study, according to what a person wants. And you can join that. You can sign up for it, and I think that they put the link for that, so you can take a look at that site, see what you think about it, and basically, it is free. Anybody can join. Anybody can start. It does cost us to do this, to run these things, to have the hardware that it takes to run all this stuff, to create the materials and all of that. But we don't have like this hard entrance thing where if you don't, you can't come in if you don't shell out, I don't know what. It's not like taking online tutorials. In that sense, we want to provide everybody and anybody who has interest in this access to the study, to real Kabbalah, and and learning the real method. The world needs it now. We're really at a crisis point. We're not going to get past it without this. So we have this other way of doing it. We have a thing called pay what you wish. So that if we want people to contribute to doing this. It's important that if you're in it, that you're helping, support it. And it costs us in a semester about $25 a person to just supply all those things. But if you can't, you can pay more than that, or you can pay less than that, or you can pay once, or you can pay some kind of according to what it's worth to you. Maybe you want to help other people. It's totally up to you. But we have a sort of a campaign going now about this. We need it in order to be able to do it, and it's up to you what you want to do according to the value that you find in it. And I can't think of anything that has like a higher value than understanding why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing here, and it's something that can really improve the quality of our experience of life. So check it out, see if it's for you, and help us out if you can.
Student is asking, why is Kabbalah now available for all public?
Good question. For a long time, Kabbalah was hidden. The Kabbalists tried to scare people off it purposely, because in order to study Kabbalah, people had to have a certain quality, an inner quality, in which they had what they call the left line. They were able to understand that they required correction, that there's nothing wrong with the world, there's nothing wrong with the system, that they could reach this by understanding that they were imperfected, that at this particular state that they're in, that they needed to rise and become like that. But the other thing is that they also, for many, like this, Kabbalah predates the sort of the Common Era. At the point at which the destruction of ancient Israel happened, Israel meaning is a Hebrew word. It's got a couple of meanings, but some people say it means to struggle with God, Israel, but it means direct to God. Yasher, direct, and Kel, God, direct to the upper force. You can't do that without an evolved ego. And for the past 2,000 years, the ego has been evolving and evolving and evolving, but not to an adequate point in which humanity as a whole would be able to work with this method. They wouldn't understand that life has its value above this world, so to speak, in the higher values. They wouldn't have the impetus to change anything, and they wouldn't reveal enough of what we call enough evil. We wouldn't be able to see in the world that we cannot progress anymore using that quality, this will to receive quality. But now, since the sort of last little bit of the 20th century, it's been very evident that we can't progress anymore using the will to receive. While it did develop us well, brought us wealth and a lot of material evolution and a lot of conflict that led to forms of social organization that are good and probably better than they've ever been in some places, have brought plenty to the world. There's no reason for anybody to be starving and all of that. And then we hit a dead end. Because that, and we saw it in the crises of 2008 and all of that, the world basically ended. The world as we know it ended in 1995. What ended? The usefulness of that force to develop human awareness. And now it's common to everyone. We can just see it. You can see with your eyes. So there was enough density of coarseness, of egoism, that there is a general need. So this wisdom can be opened up generally because there's a place for it to go. Up until then, nobody could hear it. Every time it was spoken about, it was either turned into an understanding that had to do with objectification, like religion, and we're just doing this for our material well-being, protect me and protect my country. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with our being like it, but we couldn't understand that until we wanted to escape this, because we can't live like this anymore. So it doesn't get turned into something for me. It gets turned into, we're at an evolutionary stage that we're about to go into. And this is the stuff that we need to cross that bridge. It was always there, Book of Zohar and everything was always intended for this point in human history, where it will provide us a way into a post-material reality. Not to do away with the material, but we will be living from that place for the well-being of everything, just like the natural forces take care of everything in the natural world. I'd like to just clarify that a bit. Let's play clip number 2, and then we'll come back and answer some more questions.
The purpose of life is to provide us with the means to become aware of and then intentionally grow into an inner nature that's identical to the force that set life in motion. And the supreme pleasure of revealing a single unlimited giving force behind all sensations and events on that journey, and eventually in you, is the meaning of life. The problem is that we're built to receive everything. It's all we can do, even when we think that we're giving. But this is only true physically, because for us, bestowal can never be defined by our physical actions. Even an external act of giving is still something we receive and ultimately aim to benefit from. So the deciding factor isn't that we're bound to receive, but how we receive. The direction of the intention with which we do receive, for whom and for what. That determines both the scope of our awareness and the well-being of all the aspects of nature still waiting to be in our conscious care. Our intentions are purposely concealed from us by the ego, which is beyond tricky. Their correct use never comes to mind in this world, not even in our imagination. And the goal is not something that you can attain on your own, because you aren't and never have been on your own. The intended transformation is a collaboration, an emotional integration into the broader interconnected reality. And that's impossible to achieve through something that you or someone else invented. It has to be passed down, received and learned from those who have also received it and attained it. Genuine Kabbalah is the science of purpose, and its appearance in our lives is the milestone marking the start of the conscious stage of our evolution, the beginning of receiving what can only be called wisdom. It's a tangible offer of a hand up from the upper force with an accurate map and a method of how to invert our intention and learn to live in the next, much more caring stage of human development. Kabbalah is just a term, a name for human comprehension of nature in its totality, which is the only compulsory course in the school of life. There is great beauty, depth, and precision in it. In other words, meaning. But studying it involves something very different than the study of other things. It's not the accumulation of knowledge, though there's plenty in it to be had. It's an attainment, a direct grasp and appreciation connecting us to how everything in existence works, what motivates and brings pleasure, and how we can not only receive that delight, but be a source of it for others too. In this science, it's your transformation and the changes in your inner qualities that is the laboratory exposing nature's deepest secret treasures. Because all of nature opens to us when we become inwardly similar to it.
So,
Yes, we have a little bit of time left, and I think we'll go for another blitz.
okay.
Okay?
Let's see how many.
Let's. And
Where's the clock?
here we go.
Okay.
No? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. We all have these concepts from our lives before Kabbalah. Do they filter in and out when we start to study?
Well, it depends on the concepts. One of the things that we recognize when we come to study Kabbalah is that there are things that we start to recognize things that we felt were just only ours. So we go, I felt this, but I wasn't able to express this. That's one thing. And on the other hand, there are a lot of things that the concepts drop away because a lot of the concepts that we form are incomplete and they came from a quality in us that is under transformation. As they transform, we lose those concepts.
Can real magic be considered under the Kabbalah tree of life?
There's no magic in Kabbalah at all. So, not as expressed by the European Kabbalists who never learned from a real Kabbalistic teacher. They learned magic, they learned something else, but they never learned Kabbalah.
Does Kabbalah mention or recognize the fragmentation of reality that may be in evidence as a result of parallel realities and such things as the Mandela effect?
There are not parallel realities except by the limitations of our perceptions. Everything happens at once, but do we have access to it? No, we don't. We compartmentalize all reality into pieces because we are thinking of ourselves. And Kabbalah is about the opposite of fragmentation. That's the sort of starting point for the human in terms of their ascent is as a fragment, but it moves towards the whole. The creation is the Mandela effect.
Does your Kabbalah study constitutes meditation as well?
No, meditation is an Eastern practice. It doesn't exist in actual Kabbalah.
Texts are said to be a vital aspect of study in Kabbalah. Is it within the teaching to consider that the texts have an inherent light, giving quality, or is it only true with presence of masach, screen?
Through efforts in relation to the text, light is attracted. In other words, awareness is and a change in the person, targeting them at the goal of creation happens. It's like friction between two qualities. My egoistic and rational quality against the bestowal and quality of faith that does not depend on reason, that sits above reason. It uses it, but goes above it.
10 seconds. Is this intention or thought of creation within me or outside of me?
While we're in our egos, it's outside of us. When we begin to transform
Beep.
and become like it, it more or less moves into us to a certain degree. This is what attainment is about. How much is the thought of the Creator like my thought? That's how the light enters us.
5.5. The last time was now we were out of time. Okay.
So I want to thank you all for joining us. It was great to see some new faces there with the students, smiling faces, intent faces, and we're very pleased that people who joined us on Facebook and on YouTube. I hope you got something out of it. There's going to be another course starting August 12th. And I've already said that you can, if you go to the link, you can check out the KabU site, take a look at the courses that are available there. Those two clips that we shared today are from a preliminary course that's there, which you may just want to go through just for your own enjoyment, whether or not you go ahead and sign up. But there are serious courses there. So go to the link. Check it out. A reminder: if you're studying, you need the books. in one form or another. So check out the special deals at our bookstore. And if you didn't get your questions, if you're a student and you didn't get your question answered here, if it didn't get through or whatever, put it on the forum so that the instructors can answer it for you. They're there, around the clock, basically, and they want to answer your questions. And it's good to ask questions, because I bet you that some of you thought you didn't have a question and somebody else asked the one that you wanted to know. And that's true on the forum. And what's especially important on the forum is that by doing that, you're sharing, you're creating a common connection in relation to the goal with other students there. It's the beginning of sensing that force between you. So use the forum. It's for you. Are there any other announcements that I'm not aware of?
I don't think so. I'll just... next semester.
Yeah.
We'll cover that.
Okay, so that's it, and we're going to wrap it up now. And again, thank you for joining us, and enjoy your studies.
Thank you.
Could unite humanity into a single man with one heart and one body. I'll cover him with love. It's the only thing we must learn. 'Cause we came from one point, and to this point we will return. We are one village, that's how we used to be. We are one village, and we're living in unity. We are one village, that's how we used to be. We are